Right, I've just fitted up number 1 cylinder rocker shafts with the seal kits. Just run through basically how to set the rocker shafts up in the bores. A lot of engines I've stripped down, you find the rocker shafts are actually set centrally to the casing, so there's an even gap in the bore either end. Now the way to set the rocker shafts up is actually set them up central to the rocker. So you've got a thick part of the casting there and a thin part of the casting, so you end up with the rocker shaft sitting over to one side with a big gap in, obviously big sort of clearance in that bore there up to the rocker shaft seal, and slightly protruding on this side. But that's so important. This the rocker shafts are actually set up centrally to the rocker. The problem is if you don't, is I've seen them before where they've been set out, and because you lock them up, it's not on it swells up that stage there, and the rocker shaft actually seizes up on that part of the rocker, or it's not gripping properly, and the rocker shafts come out altogether. So if you sort of have a look with this one, obviously on the shallow part you can see the bobbin on the end of the rocker shaft lock, and that's on the thin casting, and on the thick set of casting this side you can see that it's actually recessed in quite a way. Yeah. And then on the other side obviously it is the same as that side. So it's as I said, it's set up centrally on the rocker itself. So yeah, so we've fitted up the rocker shaft seal kits. We've set the valve clearances and made sure those are right, and now we're basically just going to run through setting the cam timing, which is set up. The S-cam in particular, this one's set up at, they give you a tolerance, I think it's between 5 and 5.4 mil lift at TDC with valve clearance. So I just set them up exactly as I can to 5.25 millimetre. So we've got the engine set up on TDC. So what we do is, with valve clearance there, set your dial test indicator to 0, and then you rotate the engine around until the valve starts, or the cam starts to move the valve down. Okay, so now we're going to wind it round to 5.25 millimetres. So that's 1 millimetre, 2 millimetres, 3 millimetres, 4 millimetres, 5 millimetres, 1, 2, 5. Okay, we double check, and believe it or not, very rarely happens, that's exactly on Z1, on the crank line, on the split line. Very rare. That's happened first time. So testament to the cams being ground correctly. That's all set. So we just got to go through torquing up the nuts now, and then that side's done. And then we can just rotate it around 360 degrees
and do the other one
to get to number 4, and then set that one up as well. Yeah.
Very good. Right, just doing the nut now on the end of the camshaft.
Okay. That's it.
What torque is that?
That's 100 Newton meters.
Right.
Okay, and we'll pop the tension all back in.
Again.
And again. Yeah, that's right.
It does restrict the access to the cam nut though, doesn't it?
Yes. Yeah.
Okay.
Excellent. Put the rocker shaft in. Once again. And just gently wiggle the shaft to sort of, that's it. Gently, don't ever force it, if you want to damage the bore. make sure the rocker's central. Just gently push it through, and then, without touching any of the aluminium, basically just tap it. Just so that there's enough room inside there with the O-ring for the rocker shaft seal kit.
Yep.
So that's all central. And once again with the top one, just bring that through. So there's enough room for the O-ring. That's it. And then we'll fit the rocker shaft seal kit. It's quite a straightforward job. O-ring on the bobbin. Pop that in into the hole, making sure the O-ring sits on in the recess. Put that one down inside. Tighten it up. That's it. That's tight. That's right, don't I? Sorry.
No, get
The when you fit these up, that's another one which you usually see. Always put the Allen key end, so where you put the Allen key actually into it, facing towards the centre galleries, because ever you have to, or another person sort of comes to have to do work on the engine, and you have to replace a rocker shaft or do anything to the rocker shafts, it just means that you can't take the bolts out of the rocker shaft that way, or sometimes it's very difficult to get onto the Allen keys. So as a good practice basically, which they do at the factory, always sort of keep the Allen key so you can always get in there, get in there, get in there, or get in there, because it's sort of more difficult to sort of get down there with the oil cooler in the way. So that's just a good practice. So just pop that.
Okay.
Right, just setting up the valve clearances now. So what I usually do is, on a new build, wind it down so it just opens the valve a couple of times. That way it just makes sure everything's seated properly, so you put a bit of resistance on it. You need to give it sort of a quarter of a turn just to sort of preload it slightly, and then you just sort of feel the resistance, and then just basically lock the nut. Just make sure that you feel you have a resistance there with the blade going through it. Just a bit of tight. It just feels tight.
Yeah.
So that's sort of what you want to. That's what you're trying to achieve. If it feels a bit loose when you lock it up, obviously do it again. And once again, these tools are very handy. If you try to do it with normal feeler blades, it's very difficult to actually get in there. You can buy replacement blades for these, but it's just sort of fitting it down, especially on the inlet side. You've got to sort of wiggle it down so you've got enough clearance.
Did you make that yourself, or is that?
No, that's just an off-the-shelf part.
Oh.
Porsche, specialist Porsche tool. I shouldn't think you'll find any at the main dealers these days.
No.
They don't set valve clearances anymore, do they? But yeah, you can buy them. You can buy them from the main dealers. We get the service parts. You can buy the blades separately. We get those from Porsche Centre Reading. So once again, that feels like there's nice resistance on there, and you just know, obviously after seeing thousands and thousands of these, you sort of get a feel for what's the right clearance and what's the wrong clearance. But obviously do it with the blade anyway. Now that's done, we can set the cam timing up for this side now.
Yeah.
Right, the valve clearance is set, and the DTI set on 0 once again. So then we'll just roll this round to TDC once again. One, two, three, 4, 5, 2, 5. Right, now I can see on here that the Z1's nowhere near the TDC mark on the split. So what we do is take the nut off, and we use a special tool called a bolt. Just pull the pin out. So the pins are actually threaded, so when you actually fit the pins, always make sure you've got the threaded part facing you, because that could cause a problem. Now unload it slightly to get the pin out. Okay, now the DTI should stay on 5.25.
Yeah.
Okay, so what we're going to do is rotate the engine back to TDC, and then draw the chain back up onto tension and direction of rotation. Okay, yeah. So I'm just going to get my head in the way, and because you get a little bit of slack in the pin, just give it a little bit of lead so that it's slightly before the split line.
Yeah.
Only about 1 millimetre.
Yeah.
Okay. Now you put the pin back in. Find a hole, and then just draw it up, just so you can just feel it. Just pinch the pin. Just take the slack up in the vernier.
Yeah.
Double check it there, and that would be a good starting point to recheck it. So the cam hasn't moved; it's basically been held in place with the resistance from the rockers. And so what we're doing now is rotate it all the way back off, so we're back on clearance. Make sure just by rattling the rocker from side to side, and then rotate it back round to 5.25. So 1 mil, 2 mil, 3 mil, 4 mil, 5, 1, 2, 5. Right, it's slightly out still.
Yeah.
Slightly past it, so once again, we know we're in the ballpark now. Let's give it a bit more. Find the pin. Once again, just back it slightly, just so you can feel the resistance. Okay. And we'll give it a bit more lead this time. Instead of about 1 millimetre, give it a couple of mil, because obviously a bit more slack in this one.
That's anti-clockwise.
That's it, yeah.
Yeah.
And then just bring it back on again. Always be careful, don't drop the bolt down inside the engine.
No.
And the pin. Right, and once again. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. No, a bit more. This is quite normal to take several goes at this.
So it's just slightly clockwise of where it should be.
That's right, yeah. So once again, back it off slightly. And once again. 2, 3, 4, 5, 2, 5. And that's spot on. Just one whole difference.
Okay.
So then we just go through the torquing up procedure on this again. Retorque and check it. This one's a bit easier to get to because you don't have the tensioner in the way.
Yeah.
Some people put Loctite on these nuts, but to be honest with you, I've undone so many without Loctite on, with just the wavy washer on there, and once they're torqued up, they are just phenomenally tight.
100 newton meters, that's a lot of torque, isn't it?
That is, yeah. So.
Yeah, I think the one that came off, one of them came off was assembled dry, and it corroded onto the.
Yeah, they are. I've come across them before where they've just been an absolute nightmare to get off because it's not the easiest tool to use either.
No,
with the C spanner.
Yeah.
It's they just it just slips off quite easily. That's half the problem.
Yeah.
So we've bled all the oil out of the tensioners. Now we've got to reprime them back up again. So sort of fill up the top with oil, because that's basically where it gets its oil from, because these are just splash feeds. So top that up, and then you sort of end up working the put a bit of oil in the bleed hole as well. Just back a bit of oil into there. Is it coming out the top?
Yeah.
So, yeah. And then lock it off, and then work it up and down a bit. Let's get that in. Stop that. And then just
That just gets the air bubbles out.
that's it, yeah. Work it both ways. And that's actually, that feels pretty good actually. Yeah, that feels fine. And then as that fires up and it starts to, what happens is as the sort of chain sort of goes slack, as it sort of flax around, it'll just basically pump it all up. So it's got strong tension on it again. So it's a relatively simple job that. But just remember to do it, that's all, because if you don't, obviously when you fire it up it might not bleed on its own if it's got a suitably large airlock in it.
Yeah.
So yeah, pretty straightforward that. And then all we need to do now to the engine is just fit all the covers on, fit all the front covers on,
put the shroud
obviously put the shroud on, build all the carburetors up and linkages up, put the final covers on, thermostat needs to go in there, sensor housing at the back, and it's pretty much done. So structurally it's a long motor now, so yeah, all be all sealed up.
Excellent. Well, it's been a long episode really, but
Yes. Yeah.
I think we've all learned a great deal out of it, and I'd say thanks very much for coming on the film and showing us how it's done.
No problem at all.
Yeah.
No problem.